Welcome to Parabolas Applied. This is example number 2. All right, so here's the question. A culvert is shaped like a parabola. It's 120 centimeters across the top and 80 centimeters deep. The question is, how wide is the culvert 50 centimeters from the top? So if we assume that our ground level, a culvert is basically like a ditch that normally carries water. And if we assume that our ground level is the x-axis, we can imagine that the parabola is facing up or opening towards the positive y-axis. And so that gives us the formula in our minds. We can think that's the formula x squared equals 4py with a positive opening towards the y-axis. So we automatically know that our p should be a positive number. Okay, but we can also see that if our opening at ground level or at the x-axis is 120 centimeters across, right? We've got 60 from 0. If we put our y-axis in the middle, we've got our 60 on one side and 60 on the other. That's 120. We know automatically right there also that we've got our vertex is not at the origin. So we're going to convert our x squared equals 4py formula into the offset formula, and we're going to add in our minus h and our minus k. Now if we keep our parabola squared up with the y-axis exactly in the middle, right, we get an x equal to 0. That is going to represent our h, and a y that is the negative 80, which represents the depth of the culvert, 80 centimeters. Okay, so now we can put in the 0 and the 80, the negative 80, and at this point we're looking to solve for p. And we've got our formula here with the x and the y and the p, and we need to, in order to solve for p, we need to find a set of points that are on the parabola x and y. And we can see that where the parabola crosses the x-axis or at ground level, we've got a point at x equals 60, y equals 0, and a point on the other side where x is equal to negative 60 and y is equal to 0. I think on the last example, I used the positive points, so the point on the right, the 60 and the 0. On this example, let's use the point to the left, the minus 60 and the 0. And you'll see that either way, the p comes out the same. And so if I've got the negative 60 here, I'm going to put that in for the x and put in the y equal to 0 into my formula, and now I can solve for p. And because that negative 60 is getting squared, it didn't matter whether it was on the 60, 0 or the minus 60, 0, because the square converts that back to the positive number. And you can see that we end up with a p equal to 11.25. And when we put that 11.25 into our formula, we can see that our parabola does, in fact, our culvert is 80 centimeters deep and 120 wide at the ground level at the top. So now that we've got our parabola basically defined, we want to go to the second part of this question, which is asking how wide is the culvert at 50 centimeters from the top. So we know that our y is 50 centimeters deep, right? From 0 minus 50 centimeters, because the top is basically our ground level, but we don't know what our x is. So we're going to solve, put in our p and our y, and then solve for our x. And you can see that we end up with a x squared equals 1,350. And so when we take the square root of that 1,350, we get two different numbers. We get a positive 36.7423 and a negative 36.7423. So now that we have the x component and the y components, or the y component at negative 50 centimeters and the two x components, we can plot those points, and we see that they in fact do fall on our parabola. Now the question is asking what's the width at that depth. And so we need to know what the distance is from one x to the next x. And so we can basically add those two up, or take 36.7423, multiply that by 2, giving us our final width at 73.4847 centimeters at the depth of 50 centimeters.